What is... No. Oh my god, this is pixel hair color. I'm not ready.
Hello, and welcome to episode 3 of Into the Shadows. Now, I want to thank Scoops and Mischief. Thank you both for a very wonderful intro there. I'm really shaken this evening, mostly because, well, just for the sake of having, I guess you could call it, general reference, I decided to rewatch The Exorcist again, at the suggestion of one of you wonderful viewers that decided that they wanted... Hello, Susan. Good to see you. Hello, Eric. I decided to take a viewer suggestion and decided to rewatch The Exorcist. And I was actually thinking that this evening... How you doing, Tyson? I was going to review a little bit of The Exorcist, while at the same time also touching upon another bit. I think what I'm going to do is once a month maybe review two things from two different forms of media. So I think The Exorcist and Victorian Horror. Now, some of you may be wondering what the hell is Victorian Horror. It sounds like something very hoity-toity. And you know what? You wouldn't be too far off. Victorian Horror is horror that takes place during late 19th century, early 20th century, during the time of Queen Victoria. Now, a lot of people wonder, well, what's so special about that? How you doing, Elizabeth? It's the advent of, I guess you could say, the hype of spirits, the hype of Ouija boards, the hype of seances, and the image of somebody walking around in a darkened mansion with a candle over in a candle holder. You know, that type of thing. I'm currently thinking that any portrayal of this would be just slightly bit unsettling. There was a film that's called The Others, Nicole Kidman film, not too bad, that really cashed in on this trope of contained horror, and it worked very well, especially in our current times, where people are confined to their current living quarters. The basic premise of the film is that two of the supporting cast are also confined to quarters. But back to the main topic for the moment, and we'll definitely circle back around onto that, because containment tends to be something of a running theme. What we have is The Exorcist, a Peter Benchley novel, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, please. The Exorcist, film that was loosely based on true story. They changed up the gender of the victim. The film spawned many sequels, created many horror tropes, but you have to ask yourself, well, why did it scare people? What is it about that film that got everybody unsettled and unnerved? I know some people that still to this day cannot watch the film. Why? What is so unsettling about it? The jokes and memes that spawn from it still are a little prevalent. Pea soup, my personal favorite. The idea of the person, their head completely and totally rotating. Still a little bit of a trope. A little unsettling, a little unnerving, but at times can be downright funny when done right. And then you have the funny statement whenever anything acts completely and totally unnerving. The tension can immediately be broken by uttering, "The power of Christ compels you." Yes. Somewhat off. one might say. But why does it scare? Well, let's delve into it. What we have is innocent child. So, of course, concept that evil has no discrimination. Usually will go after the young. Linda Blair's character, of course, futzed around with a Ouija board. First mistake. Ouija boards are kind of notorious for causing problems. Yeah, just a little bit. And when you contact something, it's going to fuck with you. And that's exactly what it did. It fucked with us. Horribly, I might add. But there are things in the film that seemed to be a little off. You could tell that they drew inspiration from certain things. Yes, the realisticness of it. Good, Tyson. It can happen. But here's the twisted part about this. Tyson, you may not know this. Audience, you may not know this. But Pazuzu, the creature, the demon that necessarily hunted and tormented the young one, believe it or not, is not a malicious entity. Not within the pantheons that it runs. As a matter of fact, it's meant to counter a malicious entity. A demon of the wind. Demon, in quotes here. So you have to ask yourself, well, what did they decide to... Why that one? Well, the depictions of the god, as it were rather unsettling. So, of course, you pick something that throws people off, and you get something of a villain. Gotta love that. If it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it must be a duck. Well, if it looks like it can get you in the dark, and it seems like it could get you in the dark, chances are that shadow that's near your closet when the lights are off and you're trying to go to sleep probably is going to eat your soul. Yeah. A little bit. Now, I can delve into a little bit more with this, in particular with the story, but that's not really the compelling part of the film. What's compelling is its production. Word is that the film itself was cursed. That the lead actors were also, how you doing, Michael? Good to see you. That the actors were cursed. That staff mysteriously died. There's stories of various films that are notoriously cursed, Poltergeist being one, the late Heather O'Rourke, and of course Dominic Dunn, both taken in their youth after release of the films. You also have The Omen concept there. Apparently that was a cursed shoot as well. Not only that, it's even depicting a cursed shoot. What we know is that in many ways, what bleeds through the media and affects us truly hits home. And it really screws with us in the most effective of ways. Well, we take a look at various types of media. We go for whatever it is that we can relate to. What we necessarily feel unsettled by. And what we feel unsettled by, of course, is what we relate to. Well, is Exorcist relatable? Well, we all have a young relative, I'm sure. Some of us remember when we ourselves were young. Were we susceptible? Was there something to get us? We have depictions of children insisting that they see things in the dark. Why do the parents never believe the kids? Pro tip, if you have a young one and they come to you saying that their imaginary friend is telling them to do bad things, call a paranormal team, get that kid an exorcist immediately. Because chances are, what they're describing isn't imaginary. Saying that something doesn't exist shows ignorance. There's always something there. A child does not just merely conjure something up. Regan, the character in The Exorcist, indicated the presence of something within her existence. And it affected her. It stayed with her. They tried to toy with the idea that perhaps there were psychological issues that were conjuring this, but was it? Possibly. You never know. As a parent, you'll do everything in your power to try and help the child. But how often has that ever worked? In the story that The Exorcist attempted to portray, at least in the novel, they had a priest go to I think it was a school. I could be wrong. They didn't really find too much research, unfortunately. And they tried to help this boy, and they couldn't. Not right away. It apparently was a very powerful entity that was possessing this child. Became rather violent. So, the novel, as they pushed to try and help Regan, they did everything in their power religiously after the psychological treatments proved no help. That in and of itself. First mistake. Always go the religious route first. You never know. Couldn't hurt. Or maybe it could. You see, they say that creatures of the dark have this weird thing about getting attacked or stopped, and they tend to retaliate. Sometimes going the religious route will only make the situation worse. We don't want that, no. But within the film itself, they went that route, expunged the demon, and thus all is well, at least for the first film. I really don't try and count the sequels, because let's face it, it fell under the sequel curse. The second one was just downright, you gotta be kidding me. The third one, even worse. The prequel was alright. Skarsgård playing a very young Father Merrin. I found it to be rather well done. But ultimately, the story became diluted, became convoluted. It lost all of its potency. It lost its relatability. It took it to a foreign land, and it contained the horror. Regan, when she was confined to her room, the two priests going in, almost locked in a cage with the beast, having to face it and forced to face it. Having to confront one's fears and the demon itself is always something that is known to screw with people. Nobody ever wants to confront. I always want to retreat. That's an ultimate of a fear. And because it's relatable, because it's happening to a small child. Yes. Therein lies the bit. Could it happen to my kid? Would I be able to help? Helplessness. That's key. That's powerful. When as a parent we can't help our children. Defense of innocence is something that we're all ingrained in as adults, unless we ourselves seek to render innocence ineffective. So, ultimately, defense of innocence is what The Exorcist was about. And drawing upon the idea that innocence lost could truly destroy a person. That was the root of the fear, The Exorcist. Do I consider it to be horror? Yes. Yes, I do. One, because it still has staying power. It's relevant today. Does it scare me? Well, it wouldn't scare the average adult. Most of us have kind of lost that childlike innocence. I know it scared the living shit out of some kids. But I think in today's society, it has lost a lot of its bite. Which is sad. It's still a good film, though. Now let's talk a little bit about how the containment fed into it. Back to Victorian horror. I think that's really where we should delve. Victorian horror harkens back to a time when many of the advantages that we take advantage of and take for granted didn't exist. You couldn't Wikipedia a solution to a ghost. Can't exactly sage the hell out of a house back then unless you actually grew it yourself and had the foreknowledge to do it. Electricity was at a premium. Unless you were rich, you didn't really have it in your home. So, Victorian horror. Why is that scary? What is it about Victorian horror that screws with people? That's a good question. It's not knowing what's around. Victorian horror is known to portray very large settings, but still allows a sense of claustrophobia, which feeds into those of us that don't like to be confined. We're all stuck in a quarantine right now where we can't go out. We can't interact with our fellow man or woman or however is identified. We can't, I guess you could say, connect. Instead, we're forced to make do with what we've got. That's what Victorian horror, the root of Victorian horror, truly is. Working with limited resources within a confined space and being able to handle what it is that you have. Some people did have getaway vehicles, although they were horse-drawn, and then you have to wonder whether or not the horses are ready to go. But good thought. Good thought, Beth. Good thought. You see, with Victorian horror, 9 times out of 10, the key setting and time is at night. And always during a thunderstorm. You'll notice that a good amount of Victorian horror takes place in England, where the default weather setting is rain and thunderstorms. You'd swear the sun never shines on the British Isles. My kind of place. But at the same time, it provides a sense of the unknown. Because you could be on one side of the mansion, because let's face it, they all take place in mansions or converted castles, and you hear a noise on the other side. You know by the time you get there, whatever caused it's gone, or you're not going to have time to react to catch it. And there's the setup. Then you've got the execution. Beyond the setup. The execution happens right in front of you. And you've got no hope to stay away or steer clear. Victorian horror is known to work within a very confined space. It's always in the bedroom or in the hallway. And in most portrayals within the media of such, it isn't the whole house that's acting up. It is always confined within whatever it is that can get caught within the camera shutter itself, within that specified scene. So, the spirit is attacking direct. And there's nothing you can do about it. Paintings will be flying off the wall. books flying off of shelves. You ever notice that there's always a ton of books around? Why? Because that was our version of media back then, and everybody had plenty of them to go. And a modern depiction is a basement. Yes, Megan. Definitely is. Being stuck inside of a basement is our version of Victorian horror. The sound of a mouse scurrying against paved stone. Because basements weren't made of wood. It wasn't really cement back then. Not really in most homes in England. It was cobblestone. Sometimes dirt. But somehow, mice and rat feet sound like thunder underfoot in the dark. Beautifully executed. But that is absolutely the setup, not the execution. No. The execution truly is the explosive culmination of the build-up. As I was stating, the books flying off the shelves, the wind kicking the flames off of the candles to let you know that something is there. The swinging of a chandelier, clap of thunder at just the right moment to catch sight of a shadow. That is perfectly executed. Let's circle back to The Others, film I was mentioning earlier. The film has to take place exclusively in a low-light environment where you can't see the whole room. It's shrouded in shadow 90% of the film, and that which is not shrouded in shadow is shrouded in fog. That's another key element of Victorian horror. Lots of fog. Can't be Victorian unless there's a shit ton of fog. And there's always something there. Stephen King wrote an entire book about it called The Fog. I just love saying the word fog. And shadows. There's always a shadow moving. You never know what creeps in those shadows. Wood seems to make a lot more noise at night in those films, doesn't it? A house is never just settling. Floorboards are always creaking, and no matter how hard the wood is on a banister or staircase, which, let's face it, there's tons of staircases in every single one of these fucking Victorian mansions, is always gonna creak. But, like I said, executed in subtlety. Yes, candle chandeliers. Now, yes, they did try that at first. One of the reasons why a lot of studios back then started not using candle chandeliers was mostly because studios had a tendency to catch fire. After Gone with the Wind was released and there was a fire on set, they stopped using candle chandeliers, I believe, or anything that could be considered a severe fire hazard. So that many candles on an unstable platform like that, they avoided like the plague. Unless there was severe safety measures taken into place. This was early Hollywood. But you always did have that one candle being held in the little iron plate. And it always seemed to go out at the worst possible time. Now, I want you all to picture in your mind being in a place like that where there's no sound of electronics in the background, no hum of electricity from the lights. The only thing that you're hearing is the sound of the wind, the occasional branch tapping against the glass pane. It's environmental. The environment is working against you. That's what truly makes Victorian horror all the more potent, is it's an environmental, it's an ambient horror. The setting is what's meant to scare the shit out of you. Not to mention the ghosts. Oh, the ghosts are going to scare the shit out of you too. But the environment makes it all the more terrifying. What's going to scare you more? The ghost that's slowly creeping across a wooden floor in a Victorian mansion during a thunderstorm? Or just a ghost walking around linoleum in your kitchen? I prefer the former. That fear truly feeds in, I feel at least. Any questions, comments, concerns, complaints? I'll be happy to discuss any. All right, Paige, you're saying a lot here. Feel like we're also less desensitized to Victorian horror because we don't see it as much, which then makes it more scary. Unfamiliarity, yes. I think that in a way it harkened back to a time when we were less familiar. We weren't able to relate to it more, so it becomes more of an alien environment. Sometimes that breaks away from the fear, because we can't necessarily put ourselves in that. You have a lot of folks these days that can't think back to a day before smartphones, let alone a time when there wasn't electricity, unless they're watching a super historical thing like Braveheart, or something involving knights and shining armor. They're thinking, oh, it was back then? No, actually, we've only really had electricity for the last 120 years. That's it. Wasn't that far back. You know, it's kind of... It breaks the immersion that a lot of people have. Horror ultimately has to be something you can relate to, and that's why Victorian horror is unique. Because even though we can't relate to it, it still scares us because it is still ambient. It relies on ambient horror to really grab us. And that ambience is truly, it encompasses you, it compresses you, and almost all the action happens within frame. It's never something hyper distant. Or if it is, it's rare. And very seldom is it executed effectively. One of the more interesting films that pulled it off decently, and a lot of people don't classify it as Victorian horror, is Dracula. Dracula is Victorian horror. But how it's portrayed, you don't necessarily see it as Victorian horror. Think about it. Dracula is coming for Lucy within a confined space. The bedchambers. It wasn't a bedroom back then. Rooms weren't rooms. Rooms were chambers. And when you have a bedchamber, everything exudes purity. And then you have something with fangs coming in to ruin that purity, that innocence. Which, let's face it, back then, that was the most important thing. Chastity, innocence. That's why that book scared the shit out of a lot of people. That's why that film still resonates with folks. It was one of the early Victorian horror films. Now, if you want to talk about more of a modern day depiction of Victorian horror, The Lady in Black was a good one with Radcliffe. That one was interesting. You know, you take a look at films that seem to take place. English film, like film from Europe, does a pretty good job at what it is that they know. They say, write what you know, depict what you know. Well, let's face it. English know damn well. The British do frickin' good horror when it comes to Victorian horror. Most of their action films are featuring frickin' Sherlock Holmes. Why? Write what you know. That was a Victorian hero. What you have is a depiction of horror with many different nuances. You have the ambience, which I mentioned. You have the confined space because all of the action is depicted within that close proximity. You have the claustrophobia that comes from not being able to leave the setting. Harker couldn't leave Dracula's castle. The others, the children, were allergic to sunlight. If you really kick into it, I think it was Red Mountain or something. It had James Franco. I can't really, not James Franco. The gentleman that played Loki, Hiddleston. That was an interesting depiction of confined space. I'll throw you one better. A little bit more of a modern day depiction. It wasn't necessarily, I guess you could call it Victorian horror, but it definitely followed the concept of confinement as dangerous. The Amityville Horror. The DeFeo family home that eventually was occupied by the Lutz family. And the patriarch of the Lutz family refused to leave the house. The house controlled him. It contained him. It was its own prison. Confinement. That really drives home fear. That if you're confined, will the home take you over? Maybe there's something keeping you home. Right now, we're living in a reality where it's not us that's keeping us home. It's fear. It's fear that we may die if we do go out. And you should be afraid. Because there are people my age, your age. This thing kills indiscriminately. What we're dealing with now. And the only safe space we have is our homes. And even then, you never know. I want you to think. Wonder to yourself, when was the last time you truly felt safe? Safe within the confines of your bed, or even your own home. Thinking to yourself that, could you possibly be in danger? Or what's worse, could you possibly be a danger to those that you love within the same home? It's a reality now. It's something we're dealing with every day now. And every single one of you have wondered whether or not it could be safe to go out. Every one of us has dealt with that slight burst of bravado, thinking we can conquer the monster. I hate to break it to you folks. This isn't a monster that we could fight by facing it head on. Yes, Megan. Some individuals are confined to isolation with those that could be dangerous to them. Cabin fever can screw with people too. We have spikes in domestic violence, but you have to wonder what pushed them over the edge. Being around the same people, I'll throw something a little bit more relatable. There was an episode of Black Mirror in which a gentleman was forced to stay in a single place for 2,000 years. Time moved faster for him than everybody else. As punishment. For many of us, that's hell. Some of us are living it now. Some of us are terrified that it's never going to end. I know that I kind of kicked into a little bit of a somber tone here, but I want you all to know, be safe out there. The only way that we're going to be able to beat this is if cast off the whole idea that just because it's coming from the government, it's bad. No. They say stay inside, stay the fuck inside. They say wear a mask, wear a fucking mask. They say wash your hands, guess what? Do the thing. It's the only way we're going to be able to get through this faster before drastic measures have to go in. And that's a fear for many of us. That there are going to be people that don't follow the rules and force drastic measures to happen. I think next week I'm going to talk about apocalyptic horror. Because that's what we're living in now, folks. This isn't a movie. This isn't a book. This isn't a game. We're living in a scenario that many people fantasize about. It makes me kind of laugh a little bit when some people say this apocalypse sucks, there are no zombies. Really. Right now, there's nothing coming to knock down our door and bite us, and you're already climbing the walls. You ain't gonna be able to take on a horde of zombies. I'm sorry. I like that one meme of Woody Harrelson saying, "You'll be the first to die, but I like your energy." We need to do what we gotta do. Do as we're told. For once. Listen to the rules, and we will get through this. Because right now, many of us are suffering because there are still some of us out there that don't want to follow the rules. I understand. You're a rebel. I get it. And it's coming from that douchebag. I get that too. But you know what? Despite whatever someone states away or in charge says, there are some things that cannot be disputed. What's not dispute is that people are getting sick. What's not in dispute is that people are dying. What's not in dispute is that we have to stop this from happening. And the only way that's going to work is if you feel sick, isolate. If you know somebody is sick, tell them to isolate. If you want to go out because you're climbing the walls, order a VR headset or read a book. Stay indoors. Don't go out unless you need to. Or if you do, you want to what? Make it a once a week thing. Make that your treat. Yeah, I noticed it too. I have an entity that does exist here. Every once in a while, it likes to screw with me. But, oh, thank you, Kinko. I want you all to seriously consider staying indoors. Read a book. If you want to go out once a week. Consider it your treat. Hello, Sean. Good to see you. You'll find that there are about 1 billion things. No, Megan, this isn't the thing that's in the basement. This is something new. Yes. I could tell you that there are many, many, many reasons to go out, but the reasons to stay in are 10 times more valuable. And yes, there is an entity that's currently fucking with my camera. Hello there, Cynthia. Good to see you. Anybody have any questions, comments, concerns, complaints? Cash payments? I can tell you that several of the different natures of fear and horror in the world. Yeah. There was an entity that existed in my basement. I currently live in a house that's over 100 years old. And it is inhabited by something, at least down there. I do have photographic evidence. But there's also vamps. You see, there are ways that we can survive without blood. Oh, none taken, Cynthia. What I do, what this show, Into the Shadows, is about, is I do a bit of a deep dive into the nature of horror and fear within any and all forms of media. I take a look at the particular subject for the week, and I explore why it scares us. What exactly is it about what we have seen, what we have witnessed? Why does it scare? Why does it still scare if it's been out for a long time? Books, games, web series, movies, even paintings, life experiences. What is it that drives and feeds the fear? What exactly is it that is causing the fear? What's the root? I want to think it's just the camera's autofocus, but at the same time, I'm not really moving to cause it. That's how I know it's something external. But, yeah, us vampires, we know how to get by without blood. It's not exactly the most pleasant of ways, but we have our ways. Several vampires don't necessarily feed on blood. Some of us feed on energy. I myself am more of an energy. Yeah, I know. That's what I mean. It has to be something external. Something that's popping up now. It hasn't been a problem the whole show. It just decided to pop up right when I started talking about reality, as opposed to media. That's how I know it's something out there. It's something here. And I'm getting freaking cold spots all of a sudden. Which means whatever the fuck is here is fucking with me. Yes, we do. Ironically, when the advent of spirits and whatnot started to become like a big hype thing, it coincided right around a time when electricity became more of a common presence within people's homes. It's always been my belief that the stronger the electrical fields within a home, the more likely that spirits will pop up. Oh, yeah, Tyson, you would probably be overwhelmed. I have at least 3 spirits in this apartment alone. Most likely. I also have the tendency to want to smoke more whenever something is around because it has a way of feeding on me. Any questions? By all means, ask away. I'm happy to talk about fear and horror. I still have a considerable amount of time. I got about another 15, 20 minutes. I mean, I could continue to talk about Victorian horror, if that would be your liking. Because Victorian horror truly is a root. The fear topic tonight, I spoke a bit about The Exorcist and how confronting something such as that is sort of part and parcel with the concept of facing fear within confined space itself to where you cannot escape, which fed into Victorian horror, which also pushed and fed into confined space. But with Victorian horror, it's been around a lot longer. It's been a lot more, I don't want to say exploited. That's a bad word. I want to say explored. Not exploited, but explored. Mostly because it's rich. The thing is successful execution of it tends to be very rare. Mostly because it depends very heavily on ambience. It depends very heavily on, I guess you could say, character portrayal to feed into relatable fear. And mostly because it's not necessarily relatable to us in contemporary time, it punches hard. That's because you're seeing it happen in real time to someone else. It's relatable, Tyson. You're like me. You enjoy fear. Yes. Dorian Gray, Turn of the Screw, Telltale Heart, Pit and the Pendulum. Basically anything that Poe did, as well as Dorian Gray. Very Victorian. Very powerful. Such as being buried alive, something great fear of, not afraid to be in a small space of the dark. Why do you think that could be? Well, I think it's more of your ability to be able to move. See, the darkness can easily be rectified. Your eyes will adjust to darkness. Shadows are temporary. In The Conjuring, the spirit came with the house. Maybe that was the case for the Exorcist story. Well, with the Exorcist story, it was more Reagan, who was portrayed by a very young Linda Blair. She futzed around with a Ouija board. She opened her door to something. And that ultimately is what took her over. With something like The Conjuring, however, yes, there was already a malevolent spirit or set of spirits within a home, and it took advantage of what was walking in this case the family that lived there. I forget the name of the family, but it was based on a true story, loosely based but still based. Lorraine and Ed Warren did actually explore that particular case, so it's a thing. Even the sequel was based on a haunting that happened in England as well, and there's photos of that as such. It's rather interesting when you see modern portrayals of hauntings of past, or things that were based off of past. I find it to be a little bit more relatable, because it's not just made up. It's something that did happen. And if it happened to somebody else, it could happen to me. It could happen to you. It could happen to anybody. That is what makes it potent. Relatability. Victorian horror is notorious for doing that, trying to not necessarily have the situation relatable, but the feeling relatable. And Poe was very powerful with their words. He was a poet and he know it. Yes. See, I like talking with you folks. I don't like just talking at you. So please, by all means, fire away comments, questions, commentary. I'm happy to be able to explore a little bit. But to dial back with you, Cynthia, when you mentioned fear of being buried alive, there's a couple of schools of thought actually with that. Some people say that if you're afraid of being buried alive, it might be that in a past life you were buried alive. Something along those lines. And your current life, you're attempting to avoid it. But you might have that fear, but not fear of being in a confined space when it's dark. I'd be happy to. You could actually message me on my Facebook Messenger. You could find me. It's Baronvvoltage. Or you can email me at baronvvoltage@gmail.com. I'm more than happy to be able to discuss things. When I get off of here in about, let me take a look at the time. 7 minutes. At least that's when I'm scheduled. Unless I'm continuing a commentary, then I'm more than happy to be able to converse more. I would be more than thrilled. Anybody else? Comments, questions, concerns, complaints, random cash payments. I'm happy to take those too. Alright, Tyson. The fact that being buried alive knowing that you are actually going to die and it's probably going to be slow. Yeah, that is facing one's mortality. And yes, Dawn. Back in the day, they used to construct coffins and graves with an alert system. Because back then, there were certain ailments that would put the person in a state where they weren't able to determine if somebody was dead or not. It's all right, Mikey. Believe it or not, there is something malicious that is attached to me. I know this for a fact. I've known it for quite a while. And it had a profound effect on me growing up. It had an interesting way of screwing with me. I believe I first saw it manifest when I was about 10 or 11. It actually threw me through a couple of layers of sheetrock. Wasn't pleasant. Since then, my luck has been obnoxiously horrible. I've been struck by lightning. I've been hit by cars. I've survived brain cancer and a heart attack. I've been shot at. I've been shot. I have a scar on my forehead from an explosion from an IED when I served in the Air Force. I have degenerative disease in my teeth. I experience consistent levels of pain. And on top of that, I have memory issues and memory blanks due to cerebral seizures. That is just the tip of the iceberg. And yet I'm still here. I used to joke around and say that I'm God's perfect toy to see how much a person can take. To give you a good example, I had a tooth fall out the other day. Oh, well, thank you, Cynthia. My mother, who was a bit of spiritual sensitive, indicated that whatever it was that was attached to me when I was extremely young. There was a ritual that was done to try and purge me of it when I was like maybe 6 or 7, and it didn't work. Whatever it was got more pissed off. I suffered one of my first severe debilitating injuries when I was about 7. I had broken both of my arms out of nowhere. It happened in bed. I can't even tell you if I can remember what caused it. It was the first time I had broken both of my broken a bone. So there is a storied history of my consistent dealing with things. There's a repetitive existence with it. I wish I could say that I knew what caused it, but I know that whatever it is, it likes to pick and choose when to screw with me, and it loves doing it when I least expect it. That's why I've been on my toes for a very long time. Coffee and cigarettes help. Ironically enough, I'm a very high-strung individual, so it tends to be interesting. Nymph attached. I don't follow. But it's really, it loves to feed on me. I guess you could say, oh, that's been done, Dawn. It's been done. As a matter of fact, it's been done multiple times. Didn't do shit. If anything, it brought it out to play. I have photographic evidence of when it decided to fuck with me rather prominently. I've got photographic evidence of that as well. I was living at a home in Pennsylvania. I'll look into that, Cynthia. And I went upstairs. It was a 2-story home. It was about 80 years old. So realistically, it could have just as been done both Palo Santo and sage. Both did not work. And I went upstairs for less than 5 minutes. I just went upstairs to get my glasses. Okay? This is how much time was spent. I wasn't even gone 5 minutes. Just as long enough to go up a single flight of stairs into a room, grab the glasses, and come back down. Thing is that where I was living at the time, the dining room was right next to a staircase. And when I came back down, the dining room table had been turned 90 degrees. All of the chairs that were tucked in, they were all out with the exception of one that was sitting right on top of the table. And on top of that, a box that an Oculus Rift lighthouse was sitting in the sink, and a dial-up modem was sitting in the fridge. It's weird. Now, you could see it and feel it. Is it a feeling of consistent dread, like there's about something to come at you? I'm curious. Because I can hear spirits. It sounds like a radio that's not quite onto a station. You can't necessarily tell what it is that's being said. You just know that something's being said. That's my spiritual sensitivity. That, and I can usually feel when something's around. Oh no, it's fine. It's fine. I'm more than happy to talk about it. Yeah, emptiness. Definitely a prominent feeling. Take a look at the time just to make sure. Well, I could stay on here, or I could message you all individually, or we could continue to talk. But in general, this is usually the end of the show. And I want to thank you all for tuning in. I'm more than happy to take suggestions for next week's show. If anything, feel free to message me, and just be safe out there. Be careful. And Tyson, I don't think anyone's after me either. I think whatever it is has already got me. Well, thank you, Jeremy. As a matter of fact, Jeremy, weren't you the one that suggested The Exorcist? I believe it was Jeremy. Messaged me directly. So you see, I do engage with you folks offline as well. So I'm more than happy to be able to take suggestions. And yeah, I don't think anybody's after me either. I think that whatever it is that is futzing with me, as it is right now, it's been doing it for the better part of more than 30 years. Not a problem, Cynthia. I will hit you up right after I get off here. How you doing, Joe? Thank you for tuning in. I want to thank you all for tuning in. Catch me next week on Friday at 11 p.m. I'm more than happy to be able to take more suggestions from you folks. And it's always good to know that you're all safe. Oh. Kind of actually just spun a little bit. I mean, I could stay on if you guys have more comments, questions, commentary, engagement. More than happy to do so. I apologize. It's really fucking with me now. And I'm not happy about it. I really wish there wasn't a delay. Real-time conversation helps so much. I'm glad that you folks care, because it means that you're good people. Tyson, what I'm dealing with, I've dealt with my whole life. That's why I do stuff like this. I engage with people because it helps me not think about what I deal with. I want you all to be safe. Stay indoors. Remain confined. Victorian, it's Victorian horror because of its setting, Maddie. I have seen an interview with a vampire, Joe. It's Victorian setting, one, the set dressing itself, and two, the concept that a painting, which was the more prominent capture media of the day, was the main focus. That is why it's Victorian horror. It's also confronting with mortality, which was a very prominent theme for a lot of Victorian horror. In The Others, and this is a bit of a spoiler, the twist of the film is that the entire cast is dead. They're facing their own mortality. I highly recommend the film. Even if you know the twist, it's still a good portrayal of fear. There is a Victorian horror game for those that are either console gamers or PC gamers, called Layers of Fear. I highly recommend it. It does a good portrayal of horror in that nature. And unfortunately, Mikey, I'm essential as well. I work private security. So I have to be outdoors and I have to interact with people. So, yeah. I do apologize, folks. The camera really is having its fun with whatever the hell it is that's here with me. Do you... I'm going to ask this of you folks. Do you mind if I civilianize myself here for a moment? I'm asking. I mean, I can still maintain myself, but I'm going to lose the hat. And how you doing there, Christopher? A lovely name. Oh. Thank you, Tyson. Give me one moment. Because... there we go. Just going to humanize myself here for just a moment. Because whatever it is that is fucking with me right now is doing everything it can to get my attention. Yeah. But now you thought you'd be getting a live stream with a guy and a ghost. Or a demon, or whatever the fuck it is that's fucking with me. Cynthia believes it's a nymph. As far as magic is concerned, if you're talking about actual magic, yes, I am a practitioner of forms of voodoo, as what is commonly known, but it's a variant. It's known as Orisha. I am a practitioner whose two patron deities are Shango and Shamdi. Shango and Aligua, rather. Sorry. On top of that, if you're talking about stage and performance magic, after the lightning strike and my ulnar nerve was completely and totally fried, I took up cardistry in order to be able to keep my muscles in my ring and pinky fingers mobile, because I've lost all sensation in them. So the only way to be able to keep them active is by visually doing things with them to kind of keep them in motion. Thankfully, Jeremy, I'm sorry that it keeps kicking you out. With Aligua and Shango, they are two deities that, ironically, they live so that Their mentality is live life to its fullest. Take every single opportunity that you can to enjoy all things that life gives. And in all honesty, that's how I try to live my life. I take every single opportunity that comes around because ultimately you only have one life to live. So live it to its fullest. Take nothing for granted. Be grateful for everything that you get. And do as you can to foster a life of enjoyment. And savor every single pleasure that comes along. Because you never know when you will get that pleasure again. Or if you ever will. That's basically the chief mentalities of my upper and lower deities. I make offerings to them every now and again. Every once in a while I'll draw out a glyph. I'm a very strong practitioner of sex magic. And a considerable amount of knowledge when it comes to blood magic and tantric magic as well. Some people say that my hypnosis skills are... No, I saw it too. I do a lot of stuff involving hypnosis. I hold a world record for hypnosis, as a matter of fact. I hold the world record for the most individual hypnosis within a time span. Give me just one moment here. There we go. I was getting messages in Facebook messages in a group, and it just kept on coming up and blocking. How you doing, Stephanie? That's my boss lady. Hey, Steph, guess what? I got a ghost on stream. And it's fucking with me. No bullshit. I'll talk with you again offline, Cynthia. We'll hash some stuff out. And you are very welcome. The hypnosis stuff, yeah. I've tranced 115 people within 20 minutes. Blessed be to you too. Yeah, it is, Tyson. I did not expect it to be fucking with me. It might be because I'm approaching the witching hour. But then again, that isn't really the true witching hour. The true witching hour is 3. So it's peculiar that it's fucking with me now. Yeah. Could very well be. Thoughts of possession? Yeah. You never know. Who knows what the fuck decides to trigger this shit? You know? Especially with me. What's been attached to me, it loves rearing its head at the worst possible times. Might also be that it's feeding and deciding to pop up now because I haven't satisfied a considerable number of the energies that I normally feed off of and satisfy. So, in turn, a lot of my protections are down. So, one of the downsides of quarantine, and this is going to kind of sound a little jacked up, I haven't gotten any in a while, so I haven't been able to do any of my normal sex magics that I normally do to reinforce things. Yes, it is possible for gods to have gods. It's just a question of whether you... give me just one second here. It's all a question of what theology you follow. I exist in Jersey, Christopher. In Christian theology, believe it or not, there are other gods. The one rule is that there are no gods before that one. There's talk in Bible, straight up, of other gods. It's just he wants to be the number one. Understandable. And voodoo gods, believe it or not, are also Christian. They're based off of varying different types of saints. Someone came up with a very good metaphor. The voodoo gods are basically the... Has it? See if I can move the camera here a little bit. I haven't been able to tell. You saying this one or this one? I'll be honest, I haven't been paying mind. Yeah, I saw that too. Fun. Yeah. The voodoo gods, the one where you can actually see the word cola. Sorry. The voodoo gods are seen like the angry uncles. The ones that you call when the chief deity is not who you want to go to. Yeah. The one that says cola. Got it. Part of me is just slightest bit rattled. Part of me isn't. Like I said, I've dealt with this shit my whole life. But hey, gives a reason for people to tune in. A regular haunted live stream. And it's not me doing it. Apologize. I pay attention to detail. Negative. Oh, well, thank you, Jeremy. I appreciate that. I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little bit at a loss for words right now. My brain is kind of empty. You know, I mean, I deal with shit, and it likes fucking with me. You know, I think what I'm gonna do is I believe it, Dawn. I really do. You know, sometimes we have power we don't even know that we've got. Thank you, Christopher. Yeah, I think I'm going to end the stream, but I'm more than happy to talk with all of you offline. Hit me up either at my Gmail at Baronvvoltage@gmail.com. Oh. Okay. because I've seen the other one move. I do have a YouTube. I haven't uploaded to it in a long time. I was actually thinking of uploading the individual episodes to the channel, to be honest. I just gotta look into the logistics behind that. So, give me about a week. And I'll see what I could do with it. I guess till then, you know, I'm gonna try and get some pleasant sleep, if that's even possible. And I hope to see you all again next week. You could also hit me up on my performer page. Just look up Baronvvoltage. You'll see me looking all kinds of cool with a pair of steampunk shades. Very similar to these. You know, you kind of see me like this. So, by all means, hit me up there as well. I'm more than happy to answer any questions you guys got. I'll take any suggestions that you want for next week's show. Yeah, I may do this, that. But, good night. And dream sweet when you get there. All of you, thank you very much. Like, share, subscribe, the whole nine. You know, there's merch for Team Blacklist that's available at the Hellfire.com website. I'm pretty sure that's where you can get it. And tune in to the channel. I mean, they got some really kick-ass shows. Scoops and Mischief in particular, two very awesome folks. Dana has a very awesome radio show. I highly suggest that you check that one out too. And absolutely, Mikey, message me. I'll be more than happy to be able to talk offline about this stuff. And, you know, I'm the most approachable person on the planet. You know, I don't have a life. So, please, hit me up. I'm more than happy to talk to any one of you. All right? So, good night. Like, subscribe. I'll see you all next week, Friday, 11 p.m. This is Into the Shadows. Good night to you all.